The suspense is killing us. So ready? Boom. That was a bit... Can I do it again?
Was it?
It just didn't feel right.
No, you're supposed to let it fall. We had this last week. Look, give it here. I'll show you. Fabio, watch this. Basically, you hold it this, you do this, and you just go... Boom. See? A thumbs up.
See, it's a good thing you didn't leave me to it, because I would just shoot off a firearm and then we start.
That would work too.
That would definitely cover it.
Okay, so back once again with the Renegade Master, D for Damager, power to the people. Are we recording? Yeah. Okay, let's start. So I was just testing the volumes. Today we're talking about practicing orthopedics in a place that many people don't know a great deal about. Pete, do you know what we're talking about today?
I do know what we're talking about today. We're chatting to a good old friend of mine, and indeed yours.
That's not what he says.
No, I know. Yeah. But I've got the mic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's not one of, he's the most influential orthopedic trauma surgeon in South Africa, and he's practicing out of Cape Town. And I guess we're just here to find out about what it's like to train and be an orthopedic surgeon in South Africa, what some of the differences are, what some of the socio-economic issues are, and what's going on, what it's like to live in Africa with all that wilderness and awesome countryside around you and wildlife, and what it's like to, journey out into the Namibian wilderness and almost get eaten by lions. They don't have tigers in Africa, you know that.
I didn't know that.
You do.
No, I didn't know that. Where are all the tigers?
Tigers more of India, isn't it? India and Tibet.
That's Asia. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't. Yeah.
Okay. And my ignorance is showing up once more. Sorry, have you got more?
No. So it's interviewing an old friend.
Fantastic. Most of what I know about South Africa is a little bit outdated. It's kind of gleaned from watching Lethal Weapon 2, District 9, Invictus. Do you remember that film where Matt Damon played Francois Pienaar, but he's like half his size? You know about running the Rugby World Cup?
Oh, yes. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman was Nelson Mandela, yeah.
He was. And I've always wanted to visit, but I haven't quite gotten over the trauma of all those vuvuzelas.
That was a pretty uplifting time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was... we might even touch on that later. That was a phenomenally uplifting time globally. Yeah,
it was.
For us over the UK to see the end of apartheid, Nelson Mandela released from Robben Island, bring everyone together with the Springboks.
Yeah.
But I wonder, we'll come back to that. I wonder, Olympics 2012, I digress, but we had the same thing over here.
Yeah.
2012 Olympics was probably the greatest period we'd had in hundreds of years, as it were, as a nation is coming together. And then since then, we've had Brexit, we've had all the bits have happened. It's been a shit show ever since. It's kind of downhill. We peaked in 2012, didn't we? But before we start, can everyone please just remember to hit the like button, subscribe and turn on notifications. Fabio, if you could just run that there, please.
Sithombo, we know each other from when you came to London, and I came out to South Africa to Comoc, and then you came to London and joined us and worked on our faculty for a few months, which we'll come to in a bit. But just tell us how did you get into medicine? What was were you always going to be a doctor? Was that were your parents doctors? What was the sort of background to that?
Actually, it's like most stories, it's a very long story. But I never planned to study beyond high school. And the reason for that is that, firstly, you kind of need role models in your life. I grew up in a village in the Eastern Cape, and yes, there were a few doctors, but they were just so far removed from our everyday lives, that it just didn't seem like something that I would want to do, or certainly something that I could ever get to. Then during my primary school years, we then moved out of the village or into the city. And then, of course, I went through high school. But then I discovered tennis, So I thought, wow, I could be good at this. So I played tennis in high school. And I played quite well. And I won, our local tournaments. So this is, of course, like at the time of... the racial segregation. So in my own pond, I was a very big fish, So I was quite good at that.
I never knew that.
No, seriously, yeah, I played tennis.
Sithombo, what's the secret to a good backhand? Because I'm
So,
okay at forehand, but I'm absolutely hopeless at backhand.
do you play tennis?
Yeah, I played a bit of tennis. No, we had a tennis court. I was pretty overprivileged. We had a tennis court, but I just never quite, good top-handed backhand. I never kind of nailed
Yeah.
that.
No, in fact, funny enough, like, I mean, throughout my playing career, which probably spent like 5 or 6 years actually. So I moved from single-handed backhand to a double-handed and back to single. And I could never decide which one I was better at, So I kept thinking, if I continue with a double-handed backhand, I certainly had more control, I thought, with a double backhand, but the power just wasn't there. Like I couldn't exactly hit it down the line,
Right.
but I could cross court quite well. I could lob very well with my double-handed backhand. But then I found more power in the single backhand, but I could never lob with it. I could never hit it cross court. It was only down the line. But the best backhand I've seen in the whole of tennis, men and females, was Justine Henin. I don't know if you remember her.
Yeah.
Justine Henin. She
Yeah.
had the most phenomenal backhand. Like I said, both on the ladies and the men's tour. But I mean, my ultimate idol, of course, because I was quite tall, certainly for my age at the time, and I had a very good serve. So I loved Goran Ivanisevic.
Ivanisevic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was in with Djokovic, wasn't he? In his he's coaching
Yeah,
him.
yes. So he's now the coach, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how much I disliked Sampras and Agassi
Yeah.
for always beating Goran.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I wanted to play tennis. So I thought, you know what, I think I'm very good at this. And then so I mean, like I said, at the time the country was still quite segregated. And then around 1992, then suddenly, some of those barriers were being dismantled. And we were then allowed to compete now in the rest of the country because I was sort of in the homeland called the Transkei. So we went now and played in what was then South Africa. Of course, we were also in South Africa, but go figure. But so we were allowed. So we were allowed to play in South Africa, and we went to this national tournament representing my country, the Transkei, and we won the singles. I'm sorry, we won the under 16 doubles. So this was like a national event. So from there, then of course, this is now my high school years, and I thought, what, actually I can do this thing, professionally. But I could just never.
Sorry to interrupt. Were you playing against white kids and black kids? Was it mixed?
Yeah, towards the end, yes.
Yeah.
But now that's where it sort of started becoming a little bit more difficult. That's why I said, in my own country, my own hood, I was very good. I was quite useful. But of course, the minute you dilute the talent now and get everyone else involved, suddenly they were far better resourced. They had far nicer tennis rackets. They had, far nicer clubs, because my tennis court that I played in was made of tar that you get on the road, like the road surface tar. So I played on that. So it took a bit of adjusting now to play on a hard court, which is of course a little bit faster than just plain tar. So once my talent was diluted, so my parents were like, you know what, you can play tennis like you've been playing, but also go to university, but now in my planning, like there was just no university in my future, so I didn't know what to do. And then I had a friend who I played tennis with, and he was a year older, so he went to university and got a scholarship. And with his scholarship, of course, you then get pocket money. And then he came back like over the winter holiday with the biggest music system I'd ever seen. And he obviously had CDs also. I mean, remember, this is 1993, so in our part of the world, CDs were still a novelty. So he had compact discs and he was playing music. And I thought, if this guy is doing medicine, he's got this sound system, that's what I'm going to do. So it was all about, it was just music and CDs basically that got me. And importantly, the scholarship, because so for our government back in the day, if you completed high school and you got a university entry into medicine or anything basically under the science banner, then you got a free bursary.
Right.
So, and with the bursary, of course, came the pocket money, which was then fantastic because there's no point in taking, a poor kid from like a deep, dark village and taking him to the big city lights of Durban. And then when you get in there, you can't sort of assimilate culturally because you can't afford to, and
Yeah.
many people before that actually dropped out because it's a massive jump, to go to a city like Cape Town or Durban. But at least if you have your accommodation paid for, you've got your meals taken care of, and you've got pocket money, to do a little bit of, like, what students get up to.
Mm.
So yeah, so that's how I got into medicine.
Wow.
And like I said,
Do you think that the
it was never my
tennis,
plan.
because that transition must have been really overwhelming, or would be overwhelming from someone who was just a village kid who happened to be bright. So do you think
Yeah.
the tennis kind of helped sort of broaden you a little bit in such that you were ready then to go into to university and be as good as you could be?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Because I mean, like I said before that, it was just, me growing up in my small little corner of the world. And then suddenly the borders opened up and we could see how the other, well, I'll say the other half, but it's actually the other 10%,
Yeah.
how the other
Minority, yeah.
how the other 10% lived. And now we got to interact with with those kids, you got to see. So by the time I got to varsity, I had sort of my worldview was definitely much wider than sort of my contemporaries from the same school. And I mean, I've got tennis to credit for that. But also amazingly, funny enough, um, um, I also obviously watched a lot of tennis. And so because before tennis, I never really cared about what happened around the globe, around the world. But because I followed tennis and I followed the tournaments and the players, suddenly like your worldview changes completely because now you can see people from other cultures, you're aware of other countries, you're aware of all these tournaments and how the players travel. So it certainly, I mean, you're absolutely spot on, Pete. It helped in that regard that I could see beyond my immediate world.
It must have been such an awesome look. I mean, in retrospect, it must have been an awesome time. It must have been so exciting because that was when the mid '90s, when you were at med school or coming into it and at university. That was when
Yeah.
apartheid was falling. Nelson Mandela came in '94. Did he?
94, yeah.
Yeah, and took over as the first black majority leader in modern South African history.
Yeah.
And that must have been a really thrilling time to be a student.
Look, it really was fantastic. Look, of course, it was. I mean, we called ourselves the Rainbow Nation, which is a term that was coined by our Archbishop Desmond Tutu. So there was a lot of positive energy, that came with it. But at the same time, you got to remember that we are now sort of having to interact with people who were taught and told and basically that you need to hate these people, you need to you can't be friends or interact with these savage people. So the indoctrination is unfortunately something that's very hard to dismantle. So you can remove all the laws you want, you can break down all the physical barriers, but what is very difficult to overcome is people's mentality. And so what we found was that, I mean, adversity, it was brilliant because I mean, we were all students, we were all young, and like this is the future of our country. So that was perfect. But the minute you deal with the university machinery, like the administration, the lecturers, those are of course still old people with old attitudes. So most of the clashing didn't come amongst the students themselves. It came students versus the institution. And of course, I mean, at the time, we didn't know what to call it, but I mean, we now know that that's what people call institutionalized, racism or whatever. That, the culture, unfortunately, it takes a long time to change. But, the people on the ground, I mean, it's like, if you go to most places, if you talk to people on the ground, people are often happy and people are fairly easy to, I mean, people get along so well,
Yeah.
but often the institutions and the structures in place often take a long time to catch up. Yeah, so which is what we encountered at varsity. But I mean, you're right. It was like a wonderful time to be at varsity, and I mean, in many ways, it it always shapes like the kind of person you become, because those are your formative years. So all the things that I learned socially are actually mostly from my varsity years, and of course after that, it's just a little bit of refinement here and there, but it's mostly from that time at varsity.
Can I ask, when you
Yeah.
the end of apartheid and the changes that you mentioned, would you have been able to have gone? Would you have gone to medical school had that not happened? Would there have been barriers?
So no, the answer is I would have gone to medical school, but you're sort of limited which institutions you could go to.
Right.
So, I mean, we have 8 medical schools in the country, and of those 8, only 3 were allowed to accept, black medical students, and 2 of those were in the former homelands, or the Bantustans. So I would have gone to medical school, but if funny enough, so I applied to my local medical school, but I didn't get in. And the reason is because throughout my interview, I think I only ever spoke about tennis and nothing else. So I couldn't get in.
You're a bit of a one-trick pony.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I think at the time, of course, I hadn't accepted that, tennis wasn't going to happen. So I sort of went with my rebellious attitude that, what, fine, the parents want me to go to varsity. Fine, okay, I'll go to the interview, but I just want them to know that this is not what I want to do.
But there's only so much Goran Ivanisevic they can take, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and amazingly, that was the only medical school that I had applied to at the time. So when I came back and I told them that, listen, I didn't get in. So my sister, who is 2 years older than me, actually not even 2 years, actually 2 years. So she's the one that applied to the University of Natal on my behalf, because she was, of course, now at university already, and she's the one that applied for the scholarship for me. So I mean, hopefully one day she'll listen to this and she can know that I'm still grateful.
Fantastic. So you owe her a lot. You did your orthopedic training in Cape Town in the 2000s. Noughties? Are we calling it noughties?
You like to call them noughties? Yeah.
I'm not sure. What do you think? Would you call it noughties?
Zeros.
It's funny. 20 years on, we're still not clear on this. And that was certainly for me. That was a golden era in US hip hop and rap. But I digress. Training. How was training How was training then, and how's it different now?
So look, this is other thing that's still hard to believe. So when I came to Cape Town, that was 2004 for my orthopedic training. And I was their very first black orthopedic registrar. And I mean, this is like 10 years into the new dispensation. And look, it was, looking at our country, like we spoke about the history, and most people will still tell you that most cities have sort of changed. They are nice and diverse, like except for Cape Town. Cape Town still lags behind, and the reason is also in terms of the population demographics. Cape Town is very skewed. It's like, especially if you look like in the inner city or city center, it's still extremely white. And like so when I got here, like I said, I was the first of the black registrar in the department, like first one ever. So I felt a little bit misunderstood, and but luckily for me, I'd spent a year in the UK actually before that. So I was doing locums as an RMO, and just doing black psychiatry and casualty locums for the NHS. So I'd been to a city or country in Europe, so I felt better prepared. And also the one thing I also learned very early on is that for you to fit in the team, you need to find sort of like space for yourself and a niche, like something that only you can do that makes you indispensable.
Yeah.
And at the time, for me, that became PowerPoint presentations. Because no, honestly,
Pete's the same with Prezi. That's the reason we have him around.
when I first got here, so many guys were still using. I'm not sure if you remember these.
Oh,
So
the
these
carousel.
Old school.
exactly, old school, yeah.
Histopathology slides.
So-
Click.
Oh, when
Exactly,
someone
yeah.
and people would turn up with decks of slides, and it would be handed to you to like load up these slides, and then sooner or later someone would drop the carousel.
Someone drops them, exactly, and it's happened so many times. So basically, I inherited my previous boss's office, so these are his slides.
Right.
But anyway, so when I got here, some of the guys had not even learned PowerPoint. They were still using the old slides. So then I became the go-to PowerPoint guy.
Yeah.
So now suddenly, if you had like a presentation, certainly for most of the registrars and a few of the older consultants. So now that's how I became useful, so I had my own space in the team, and suddenly I was irreplaceable.
And there you were, you were doing word art and transitions and all sorts.
All of that, the
swirly
the animations and the font, and
Oh my God, yeah.
So that's how I sort of got to just fit in. And look, of course, you fit in at work. And the beauty with orthopedics is that we are all very similarly minded, and so it was very easy to get along. But the minute you have to interact with the other departments, like anesthetics, suddenly firstly they don't know who you are. And you sort of need to you feel the need to prove yourself, and also things that the kind of microaggressions we face in Cape Town, and I say we because it's it still happens, of course, to a lesser degree towards me, but I mean to the new trainees, they are still sort of finding it a little bit challenging, but the microaggressions are very subtle and very nuanced, because remember, we're dealing with educated people, so it becomes so difficult to react to it, or at least to call it out, because like I said, it's so subtle that if you talk about it or if you try to respond, then you almost come across as being paranoid, or being overly sensitive, or just being a troublemaker. So, and I mean, I get, like I said, to this day, many people, certainly the new trainees, still come, to my office, to come and cry in this office, and it's the same things that they complain about, like that, you come into theater, for example, and the first question is like, how long are you going to take with this case? Have you done this before? So, of course, those are legitimate questions. You may argue, but of course, you know that they're not innocent questions. Like they're very layered.
The questioning competence, right? And
Yeah.
ability and
Exactly.
knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
Indirectly.
So it becomes so difficult because now you've got this massive burden of, it's probably like a triple or a quadruple burden, whereby you are exposed to the microaggressions. So you have to sort of live with that. And if you decide to do something about it, then you must bring it up in a manner that doesn't polarize people, in a manner that's acceptable to the oppressors, so to speak, because you need to gain their confidence. So now you can go and confront them. But of course, once you've had enough, once you've had the nerve to, to take it on or to take them on, then of course you're going to be faced with denial, denialism, because nobody said anything nasty. So like, why are you guys so sensitive?
Yeah.
So then now you face the burden of proof that now you must prove it.
And a lot of it then becomes he said, she said, right? It's
exactly, yeah. And of course now the only way that you can prove it is by calling it out as it happens, which then of course turns you into an absolute asshole now, because like you're like so sensitive, and like like you can't take a joke. And so once you get labeled the troublemaker, then of course you sort of get ostracized, and So people, or who are looking at this and watching, of course, now get scared because the person who spoke out has now faced these terrible consequences. So they don't speak out, they keep quiet, and then it just self-perpetuates. So it unfortunately still happens, and it'll hopefully I think it gets better every year as the demographics change, but
And mindsets
it's
change.
unfortunately still there, and the mindsets change. Yeah.
But for these people, a lot of your trainees, they're lucky. They've got you now as a role model. You're the prof. I mean, you didn't have that, right? You, I imagine there were times when you faced out and out racism from patients who didn't want a black doctor treating them.
Yeah, look, I mean, it happens. Look, it still happens, and the thing is, with patients, it's probably even more hurtful because I mean,
Yeah.
you can sort of take it from from a colleague or from a senior, but for someone that you're like, what, I'm here to help you, and suddenly like they look at you and they're like, so like where's the doctor, and so I mean, it happens to me, it still happens. But of course, the same thing happens to our female, trainees, and now it's even worse if you're female and you're black. It's like a a
Double whammy.
yeah. But look, I mean, like I said, it's unfortunately, something that is, that there is history behind that, but it can only get better, and it's up to the people responsible for the departments and for this institution to ensure that it's as inclusive as as possible. Which, I mean, sorry to digress, but I mean, just because when I came into
As
the
long as you're not about to say,
department,
as long as you don't say tennis is the next word.
no. So
You can digress all you like.
Because when I came to London, I mean, the first thing that struck me about your department was like the diversity of it. I'm like, just imagine the irony of coming from Africa. I'm coming to Europe, and then like here, like so the department and the hospital is far more diverse than my hospital back home. So that was quite refreshing for me to see.
When you have a patient who says, "I don't want you to treat me," or to a trainee, how, just for people listening or watching, how do you address that?
Look, Kesh, it's never as in your face, as that. So I've never heard anyone say, "Look, you cannot treat me because because you're black," but you can sense it. Like I said, it's going to be there in the questioning.
Yeah.
It's going to be sort of there in the interaction, but as with many things, the minute your competence comes through, because most of the time, racism is just ignorance, and but the minute there's a sense that, okay, if I know what, there is sort of competence, there's authority, and then they're going to be fine. So the most important or the most difficult part, if there's going to be a problem, is often in the first minute or two, and I know that if I sort of talk past the 2 minutes, then suddenly, it's all good, because now they realize who you are, what you can do, and what your place is in the team, and it's also amazing because you can almost sense the shift, because I mean, I would go and see a patient, it's, unfortunately, if you're a tall white male, you are the default figure of authority.
For sure.
Yeah.
So if I go with a black, tall white intern and we go to a patient, the eyes will glaze past me and fixate on him. And of course, now, like, as I start talking, the eyes will come towards me, but then glaze back now for affirmation to the intern, like, is
this guy for real?
Fine. Yeah. And then, of course, like, just as the interaction progresses, then you can sense that, okay, fine, now they know who you are, and there's, okay, fine, let's go with this. So like I said, so most of the interactions, like, are never gonna be like as harsh and and in your face, like I said, I mean, most people are aware of what the issues are, but unfortunately sometimes it takes a while for the indoctrination and the attitudes to catch up with the moment, but the minute they let go, then things are fine.
It's fascinating to hear you speak and how you've picked up on all these hidden cues of where the visual gaze goes and all these things.
Yeah.
And I guess you must weary of. Do you find yourself like when you see the sixth or seventh person in clinic where the same thing plays out? Do you find yourself, oh, I'm so weary of this little dance we have to play where I have to win each patient over or win each like theatre staff over, or I have to win.
Yeah.
It's always a battle in gaining credibility where you wouldn't otherwise have to.
Yeah. Look, I mean, like I said earlier, it's luckily for me, it doesn't happen much anymore because, like I said, I mean, I've been here for 20 years now, and so I've got. In fact, the only other time that I sort of sense it is when there are new anesthetic trainees, because now they don't know who you are. So you walk in, say hi, and like they don't really care, and of course they're still waiting for the consultant. And then the minute they realize that, okay, fine, this is the consultant, then I look again, like I said, it's like always so palpable when it changes, it's like, so
Is it kind of fun in a way?
it depends on the thing is, of course, I mean, I see that, for myself, I see it as a greater responsibility that, even by not saying anything, but just by being present, and just also how you treat people like in everyone's presence, because it's just all about affirmation. So if I've got a new reg and like there's like an anesthetic team, the way I talk to him, like has to be very affirming, towards himself or herself, but also, they need to know that I've got full confidence in the registrar, because also they take their cues from you as well, which is where, I mean, I say to the guys all the time that, yes, of course, as a white male, you yourself may not necessarily have any prejudices. I mean, nobody ever says they're racist anyway. But, what you do when people are watching you is very important. Or what you do, like if you see something happening, you should be able to say, you know what, guys, not in my presence. So you must call them out, because often what happens is that people just will see someone being mistreated and they keep quiet, or they will sort of hear a joke that is not appropriate and they keep quiet. And the minute you do that, then of course you just fuel that same problem. But if you nip it in the bud the first day it happens, then the one thing that you've now guaranteed is that that particular conversation or that joke will never be said again in your presence. So that's like that's one less terrible interaction. And just like that, like
you
then
break the chain.
You
need advocates.
Exactly. And you
up.
have to be actively, and you have to be active about it, like, so you can say it, but I'm not racist. It's just not sufficient, especially if you're in a position of influence, because I mean, we are dealing with we're dealing with young minds, we're shaping young minds, and whatever they see you do or whatever they hear that comes out of your mouth, they think it's appropriate because it came from Professor Pete Bates. So if Professor Bates can say it, then of course
they will never make me a professor, not on a month of Sundays.
But everyone just assumes that he is, so it's okay. Can I ask, do you feel that the situation with regards to race is it any different now from when you trained?
Look, I'd say yes, Pete. Cash, yes, it is, in the sense that, yes, of course, we're still lagging a bit behind, but the culture is changing. There's certainly a whole lot of awareness now. There are campaigns, from the university, and there are, and there's like active recruitment, to improve our diversity with the new appointees. So it has definitely changed. But of course, I mean, if you want change, it can never happen soon enough. But, we are definitely getting there. But, it needs active intervention. You can't just sit back and say, okay, fine, now I've done my part, and that's it. Because unfortunately, most things tend to default to, towards chaos, so to speak. So if there's no active intervention, then, I mean, I'll make an example with our, registrar applicants, that when I first got the job, I was quite active in sort of getting people to come to Cape Town, sort of getting more diverse candidates, getting females to come. And I succeeded, for the first couple of years. Like, it looked like things were looking great. We were certainly better than other departments. And then I got busy with other things, so I took my foot off the gas completely. And I sort of woke up 4 years later and I realized that the guys that I recruited 4 years ago are now doing their final exams and they are going to pass and leave, and nobody else has replaced them. So now the lesson for me, also the complaint, was that, like, why is it up to me only? Because if I don't do it, nobody else does it, because the system just isn't on autopilot just yet. So
that's
it
right.
needs active intervention.
You need advocates.
And that's one thing I took from Hani. The conversation we had with Hani is that getting diversity is an active process, but maintaining it is also a strongly active process, because we do tend to default, as you say, to chaos, or to just
to what you know.
To what you know, just recruiting and hanging out with people that you know.
Shifting gears to a clinical point of view, forgive my ignorance. I'm curious what it's like for access to equipment and implants, because over here, Pete's like those players at Wimbledon, when they get the 3 tennis balls on their racket from the ball boys and they're like, choose the one they want. Pete's like, open a large bend, open a small bend, open a T plate, and he chucks 2 of the plates away, right?
Yeah.
It's not quite like that.
So I'm curious what it's like for you guys.
Okay, so look, I'm just going to maybe just start broadly with our healthcare system.
Please.
So, we've got 2 parallel systems, like the private system and the public system. And so the private system is for people who have private insurance, or at least can pay, out of their own pocket for the
Treatment.
healthcare services. Yeah. So that is as good as you will get anywhere else in the world. In fact, there was a survey about 4 or 5 years ago where our private health system was rated in the top 5 in the world. Wow. So it's like, it's fantastic. Like I said, you could walk into any hospital like Royal London, or you could walk into our private hospitals, same facilities, same everything. They are 5-star. And now they only service 15% of the population. I mean, these are just sort of rough percentages, but it's roughly 15% of the population. And then the public health system services the other 85%, but they spend the same amount of money. So there's 50% spent on 15%, and 50% of the money spent on 85%.
Yeah, it doesn't add
so
up.
there's a massive disparity in what in the money that's spent. But now, if you look at the public health system, there, it's a question of having, the expression is islands of excellence in a sea of need. So what happens is that we have 8 medical schools, and each medical school has a teaching university and a teaching hospital. So those hospitals are funded centrally by the government, and they, again, I mean, you could walk into many of those hospitals and the treatment you get is going to be comparable and competitive with the best in the world, which is where I work. So the implants, we have access to implants. I've got the same access to the implants that Pete has, except that I do my pre-op planning, so I only open one.
That's the difference. That's the difference.
Yeah, I plan properly. And
I've slandered Pete now in public.
So we're very lucky in that regard. So for me, the implant, look, we of course exceed the implant budget, but no one ever comes to stop you from operating because there's no money. So we do what we need to do. And the biggest irony, though, is that I mean, I'll make an example with limb reconstruction, for example, like the talar spatial frame. We can bank in 10 frames with 10 struts in one day with no problem. But if you are privately insured, then your funder will say, look, your implant budget for the year is £10,000, which means that I can only maybe put in 8 or 6 struts instead of, instead of the 10 that I wanted to put in. So if you're in the state, there may be a waiting period, towards getting your surgery, which I'll get to just now. But once you in the ward, once you're in theater, there is no limit to what we can do for you.
Yeah.
And what we can do is, is comparable and competitive with the best of them in the world. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So
That's really useful to know.
And is it like that throughout South Africa, or is it the islands of excellence where you get
yeah,
that, or is it
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like that throughout?
yeah. No. So it's like that in the big hospitals,
Yeah.
which are university affiliated.
Mm.
And then one tier below that is what we call secondary level hospitals. So now those are funded by the provincial government. And the difference there is that if your province is up to speed and they are quite useful with the spending and administration, they're also quite well funded. So this is not talking about the Western Cape and some of the other provinces. But if your province is a disaster, and like my home province, I'm sorry to say, that's the that's the Eastern Cape. So those hospitals are basically at the mercy of administrators. And if it's poorly or badly run, then that translates to the services that you can get. So they are the ones now where you will go in and they'll say, you know what, we've got no more funds for the year, so no further arthroplasty, for example,
Right.
or you can't do spine surgery, or you can only do 10, per month. So that's the problem with poorly run provinces. And then you've got now even one level below that is the primary sort of level hospitals, or the district hospitals. And that's where now most of our problems arise, because I mean, we live in a geographically vast country,
Mm.
you know. So if you live in Cape Town or in the Western Cape, the ambulance network is quite sort of well organized, and I mean many patients will get to the right institution at an acceptable time. But the minute you venture out, onto the countryside, then if a child falls off a tree and sustains a supracondylar fracture, they are many kilometers away from the nearest clinic, because first they must go to the clinic. And by the time they get to the clinic, there's no ambulance, so then you have to wait until the following day or even 2 days before you get to the your referral hospital. And when you get there, of course, there's a long queue of people waiting for surgery. And so they put you on traction, and before you know it, it's 2 weeks later, and you can't do much about it. So there is that problem, unfortunately, and like I said, it's like purely a function of the geographic vastness of the country,
Mm.
but also, of course, the socioeconomic issues. That yes, of course, if there's no ambulance, why don't you just go yourself to the hospital? And it's just too expensive to get there. So for many people, it's prohibitively expensive, and they will just then only go to their local hospital or local clinic and just never get beyond that. But luckily, it's something that's in the like minority of cases. I mean, I can speak mostly for orthopedics, that ultimately, many people will get to the correct institution. Some, of course, with a bit of a delay, but there are established referral patterns that at least you will get the healthcare that you need. But of course, like I said, not always on time, but also unfortunately not everyone gets there.
Mm.
So those are the challenges of, look, again, it's, I mean, of course we can't always blame the legacy of apartheid, but it's a direct consequence of that there were just not enough hospitals for the majority of the population.
Mm.
So do
Sure.
most orthopedic surgeons have a big malunion practice, non-union practice, sort of like picking up things that maybe weren't done to quite the standard they should have been first time round?
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, if look again, I mean, I look at our deformity clinic here. There's very few patients that were treated in our hospital that will then go on and develop a deformity. But yes, of course, they do exist. But the majority is patients coming from other provinces,
Mm.
or other small hospitals. And funny enough, also neighboring countries.
Yeah, so I was going to ask about that. What is your relationship with Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe?
It's not an official relationship health-wise, but if you speak to the guys in Johannesburg, they will tell you that there are times where the entire ward, or trauma ward, is full of foreigners. So, patients will get injured in Botswana. They know that if you make your way into South Africa, into Johannesburg, you will get the treatment that you need, because, for trauma, of course, there's a rule that you can't turn anybody away. Like you
Yeah.
can't ask them for papers, you can't ask for anything. Whoever makes it into hospital gets the treatment that they need, which is slightly different, of course, for elective surgery. So most of the deformity work, comes from peripheral hospitals and like I said, neighboring countries.
And is there
But
is there a border that people need to cross? Is there a physical border, or is it just? Forgive my ignorance. I don't know.
Just keep walking till you get to Joburg.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, so I've got people that I know who are from Zimbabwe, and some of our helpers, certainly as a group, are from Zimbabwe. And yes, of course, there is a border, but it doesn't really exist because
Right.
some of them don't even have passports. You just simply walk across or drive across.
Right.
It's quite a porous border. So most patients will come across. I've had a patient who took a plane from Nigeria with a pelvis fracture and flew to Cape Town because of look, I'm not sure which part of Nigeria he was from because there is some orthopedics in Nigeria,
Yeah.
but he said no, he just wanted to be treated in Cape Town. So with his type C pelvis fracture, pelvis binder, and a catheter, he got into a plane and flew to Cape Town.
That's tenacity. All to see
Yeah,
you.
yeah, no,
Get me to the prof.
unbelief.
Get me to Sithombo.
Yeah, and then we also have lots of patients from Namibia. So with Namibia, it's often quite formally arranged. So they will, because they have a very well run motor vehicle accident fund, so they will fund all road traffic related injuries. And if it cannot be that they can do it in Namibia, then they will arrange for transfer to Johannesburg or to Cape Town. So that's just the state service.
Okay.
And I've been to Namibia a few times to do some cases there because I don't know if you've been to Namibia, and if you haven't been, you should go. I mean, you live in the UK, so your land mass is like that big. So Namibia is a huge country, like it's massive, and the population is like just over 2 million.
Wow.
So the roads are, look, it's mostly gravel roads, unsurfaced, but the distances between places are long. So most tourists will go there. I mean, you can drive in Namibia for 2-3 hours without seeing another soul, just you and the open road. So it's a beautiful country. You must visit it if you can. But what often happens with the tourists is that they're not used to driving on those roads. So you drive on a straight road for an hour, 2 hours, no other car passes you. And then you go faster and faster and faster. And then suddenly there's like a bit of a curve. And then they sort of overcorrect the car as it starts drifting, and then they overturn.
Roll.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So that they have quite a high incidence of road traffic accidents, and many of them are high energy, so they often so they fly those patients to Cape Town, or if the patient is too sick, I mean, it's a 2-hour flight to Namibia, so we just fly and do the cases there.
And a lot of these countries have bone setters, don't they?
Yeah, look, not so much in South Africa.
No,
so
but in the surrounding countries, Nigeria, I believe, do.
Nigeria is got a massive culture and history with bone setters. It's funny because I've got a fellow at the moment in that department from Nigeria, and it's a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago, just to find out exactly where they fit in and what they do. And so, look, it's obviously traditional medicine, and it sort of differs from, I mean, like if you have a cold or a pneumonia, it's sort of conceivable that someone can mix a few herbs for you and boil them and give you the medicine to take and you will get better. But where it becomes difficult with fractures is that, I mean, there are some fractures, yes, that you can sort of put a wooden strut and strap with a bandage, like an ankle fracture. So those ones will get better. And I mean, from your practice that there are ankle fractures that you can treat surgically or conservatively, and at 1 year the outcome is the same. So if you have one of those fractures, then it's fine because your outcome will be the same. But what they struggle with is displaced fractures, because firstly they don't do any x-rays, so
Oh,
they
right.
will reduce, so they'll reduce as much as they can, and then you just get some kind of a bandage and some ointment to apply on the skin and to keep it warm, and that's it. So that, luckily, like I said, for us women in our country, we don't have bone setters. But Nigeria, yes, certainly some parts of East Africa, like Rwanda and Tanzania, it's it's still there. And in fact, this fellow I was talking about is just sort of shared a very painful story, and he says like a lot of that happens still. Is that, excuse me, they will have like a child with a supracondylar fracture, displaced completely, and they apply a tight bandage around it, and send the child back home. And of course, then the limb becomes ischemic, and you know, of course,
Contractures
leads
and
to
everything.
no amputations.
Oh,
You know,
jeez. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And he says that is not uncommon. You
Right.
know,
A lot of your the publications that I've read of yours have been around gun violence and around the management of gunshots.
yeah.
Tell us about the socioeconomics behind that and some of the reasons why handgun injuries are so prevalent.
Yeah, it's actually a big problem. If I look at the stats, I mean, as a country, about 25 people are shot and killed every day. This is like for the last, I don't know how many years, 10, 15 years, like 25 a day. I mean, for a country that is not at war, that is just unacceptable. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, if the UK were to invade Afghanistan again, um, and you lost
Again.
20,
Yeah. It wouldn't
yeah,
go well.
and and you lost 20 soldiers every single day for a year,
There'd be a
you would
national
think twice
outcry.
about.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you would think that war is not winnable,
No.
you know, but with us, it's like I said, it happens, and the issue
Sorry,
there, I mean,
can I just interrupt you there? How does that
yeah.
compare with like for the US, for example?
No, 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 no. So now, again, as a country, I mean, our homicide rate is probably in the top 15 or so in the world. But for Cape Town, it then is much higher. I mean, we're sitting at about 60 or so per 100,000 homicide. I
Wow.
mean, just by comparison, London and Amsterdam are about 2 per 100,000, 2 to 6 per 100,000. So it's quite a violent society. And of course, the causes for violence are quite multifactorial. It's easy to say, just silence the guns or remove the guns, or like, why are people so angry all the time? But of course, if you're unemployed and you disenfranchised and you're uneducated, you don't really value your life that much. And so people get into gangsterism. So it's mostly actually gangster related. So it's just all the gangs. And of course there is also like an opportunistic criminal element to it, because if you look at I mean, for us, the typical gunshot victim is a 20-year-old male who doesn't have any education beyond basic education, who is unemployed and doesn't have both parents living with them. So it's a massive, socio-economic problem that is quite systemic. So you can never solve it by saying that, what, let's solve gun problem only. You need to solve education, you need to solve employment, you need to have social support structures. So, and of course, it goes hand in hand with alcohol as well, because again, if you look at our trauma admissions, about 40% of our patients in the trauma unit, their injuries are alcohol related. You know,
Yep.
it's either the person themselves they're drunk, or they were hit by a drunk driver, or they were driving from a club, or they were driving to a club or to a place of alcohol, or from a place. So it's just all alcohol related. And more than half of the road fatalities are also alcohol related, pedestrians jaywalking, drivers drunk. So the two are quite interlinked. It's just all basically interpersonal violence and trauma and homicide, which, yes, of course, in the hospitals we intervene, you treat them. But the analogy we often make is that, what we do is similar to just mopping the floor, but the tap upstream is wide open,
Yeah.
So,
So tell us about some of your efforts in reducing interpersonal violence and injury prevention, as you call it.
yeah, so, I do that work mostly with the country South Africa. And no, that realization came just again from looking at the trauma patients that, I mean, yes, of course, I've built an academic career of some sort, treating the patients, but you get to a point where, you realize that your efforts at treatment only are just not enough. It's a major systemic problem. It's a wider societal problem. So you feel the need to to assist with some efforts towards at least towards prevention, because the thinking is that, armed with the clinical knowledge that you have, the policymakers will be able to listen to what you have to say and be easier to convince. So being a trauma clinician sort of then carries that moral responsibility, to be involved, to some extent at injury prevention. So the work I do with Country South Africa, so we are a lobby group, and basically what we're lobbying for is for removal of civilian firearms, because the problem there is that, most people who've been shot, it's low velocity civilian firearms, and we call them illegal, or rather people call them illegal guns, but actually they're not illegal. They were once legally owned.
Okay.
Just that now you will
And
own
they
your firearm.
they enter the market
And
somehow.
end up exactly, yeah. So, and there is this mistaken belief that, people own firearms to protect themselves. But there's enough evidence out. Yeah, there's enough evidence out there to show that if you own a firearm, you're more likely to have it taken from you actually than you using it to protect yourself. And also, if people know that you have a firearm, the criminal element are going to want to come and take the firearm from you.
Yeah.
Our police men and women get targeted by criminals for the firearms. So, and people rob, farmers, because farmers live in remote areas, and people know that many farmers have got guns. So they will go and rob the farmers for the guns. The house breakings, the first thing they ask for, do you have a firearm? And they want it, like they want to see the safe. So it stands to reason that if you reduced the amount of firearms that are legally owned, then you will reduce the pool that eventually makes its way into the illegal market. And of course, it's not just something that we say. It's been proven. There was a couple of years ago where they made some changes to how you get a license and some amendments to the Firearms Control Act. And the minute you reduced access to licensing, then you reduce access to firearms, and there was a visible drop in the number of injuries. So there are, submissions at the present moment to Parliament about, that clause where they say, you can own a firearm for self-defense. So we want that clause removed, and of course, you can imagine the gun lobby.
So, and it sounds like America, right, where the right to bear arms is a very patriotic, well, not patriotic, what's the word? Passionate issue.
Yeah, heavily impassioned.
So you see, so for the Americans and their amendments, for them, they can call it a right, but for us, it's not a right. There's nothing in our constitution about the right to bear arms. In fact, the only thing in our constitution is your right to your life. And if firearms are a threat to your life,
it's the
then they're
opposite.
unconstitutional.
Yeah.
No, we just go through phases of where to get stabbed becomes fashionable.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's being stabbed in the back. Sometimes it's being stabbed in the ass.
Do you remember
Sometimes-
the buttocks was a big thing?
Buttocks. We went through a long thing of buttock stabbings.
Yeah.
There were,
General surgery, orthopedics, general.
And then we went through like machetes were fashionable for a few years, and then we've moved to zombie knives, like the old-fashioned Rambo knife.
Swords. There's some swords. There's a sword on the tube last week.
Yes.
Usually,
Listen,
samurai
because
swords there's someone told me for samurai sword attacks there's a 100% association with mental illness.
100%.
Oh,
Yeah,
seriously.
yeah,
Well, I suppose, I mean,
with psychotic illness.
I say it's just sticking with the gunshot talk is
Yes.
that, I mean, if, because I said we live in a very segregated society. So you could come to Cape Town and you will not see that part of Cape Town at all. So if you're middle class in Cape Town, you don't have a gun problem, you will never see it. And if you work in a hospital and you don't work in the trauma unit, you will never see it.
Right.
So it's like localized to just one section of the population. So because every time I give a talk on our numbers in Cape Town, it scares the people. And
Scares me,
nobody,
yeah.
nobody, no, no, I can assure. I mean, Pete came. I
Yeah.
don't think you ever felt unsafe.
No,
So,
So are you
like
saying...
I said, you will never see it.
Yeah,
Sithombo felt like shooting me, but
Yeah. So, Tombo, is it fair to say that knee surgeons are safe in Cape Town?
Knee surgeons are safe in Cape Town, yeah, so you can come anytime.
I'm on the next flight. I'm on the next flight. Can we move on and talk about
when you came to London? So your wife was doing an oncology fellowship. Is it the Marsden? Was it?
Yeah. So she came to the Royal Marsden. So she's a general surgeon.
Right.
And so there was a gap in her department so in orthopedics, we do have orthopedic oncology. So they'll do the bone tumors, but there was a gap for soft tissue sarcomas, specifically like retroperitoneal things. So there's a guy, oh God, I forgot his surname now, but his name is Dirk. I'll remember just now, but he's South African, like most doctors in the UK. So he's South African.
So when she came over,
she came over, for the fellowship. So I came basically, as
you're an established consultant at this time, right? You've been in practice for like 6-7 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I came on an academic sabbatical, basically as a +1, for her. And yeah, so that's how we found ourselves there. But luckily, I'd met Pete the year before when he came to Comok. Actually, you came to one of our previous meetings because I didn't invite you. How did you get in there?
Yeah.
What, to the AO meeting?
No. Remember, I had a small cadaver meeting organized by ITS.
That's right.
At the Children's Hospital.
I imagine if there were free drinks there, Pete just turned up.
I will fly many miles for free beer.
Yeah.
Track. So you came to London. The whole family came over, and you came to Royal London. And how did you find it? How did you find that sort of like 6 months in London experience? How did you handle it? Because you came in winter.
So I came with the whole family, and there are two components to our time. There is the social component, and of course the work component. But just starting with the social part. I mean, my kids were 5 and 3 at the time.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much they grew in that 6 months. And also when the things that they got to do, because in Cape Town, I get into my car, I go to work, they go to school, and but in London we didn't have a car. So now suddenly we were walking a lot together. They love the trains. We lived in Balam, and they could tell you the train stations from Balam all the way to London Victoria. They would guess the next station, and so they love the trains. They love the subway, the underground. They love the buses, those double-decker buses.
Yeah.
So as a family, it was great for us because we spent so much time together, so much time walking. And we've got like a 4-bedroom house in Cape Town, and we moved to London where we were in a 2-bedroom apartment in Balam, and it was us, and so we brought our. I
would suggest to you that all of Balam is the arse end.
Easy.
So we brought our nanny with as well, because we looked at the rates of childcare in London, and we're taking out. Also because we didn't want too many changes for the kids.
Yeah.
So we brought our nanny, and
because you're both working all the time. You and your wife are at work all the day.
We're both working. Yeah. So we had this small apartment, and the 5 of us were in there. So we really grew very close. But also the school, I mean, again, I mean, it's the same theme of diversity and stuff, because the school that my kids went to in London, which was Evelyn Day School, also in Balam, was far more diverse than the school that they go to in Cape Town. Cape Town is still so segregated. So if you are middle class, you're going to live in a middle class suburb, which is not going to be very diverse, unfortunately. And look, again, that's a function of Cape Town. It's not a nationwide problem.
Understood.
So we got to London, and suddenly, like, wow, look at this school, like, look at these beautiful shades of brown, like just like a nice spectrum in the same school. Like, you have to leave Africa and come to the most European parts of Europe to experience diversity. So that bit was very nice for the kids. And then, I mean, work-wise, like just working at the Royal London. I mean, I've been to a few hospitals, around the world, just to visit, and many people, of course, will claim that their hospital is very busy and this and that, and the spectrum. But I mean, I always leave thinking, doesn't compare to what I do, or to what I see. So your hospital was the first hospital that I went into, and I thought, geez, this is like home in terms of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Minus the gunshots, of course, but they're like,
Yeah.
geez, like, you get open fractures, you get like horrible pelvis fractures, you get, I'm like, so I was like, I could work here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that bit was very nice to see. And
But you say that, Sithombo, but Cape Town and South Africa in general is known for your trauma centers are known for volume, aren't they? That's what
Yeah.
that's the thing you go to as you're a trainee. You go there for volume, don't you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we would easily, I mean, look, because of the very well established referral system, so we are quite protected as a tertiary institution. But I mean, we still go through, like 3 or 4 long bone fractures every day, like
Yeah.
there's like open femur, open tibia. So that we see a lot of. But my point was that, the other hospitals that claim to see trauma in Europe or somewhere around the world,
Yeah.
or certainly in the global north, they don't see trauma.
No,
They call
it's
it
fair weather
trauma,
trauma.
but it's not trauma.
Yeah.
So the first
Pussies.
one, yeah, the first fir- the first time I saw that was at your hospital. I was like, okay, well, this is like, I just enjoyed, because I mean, I went there expecting to see, Colles fractures and, necrophyma fractures, and amazingly, I didn't see much of that. It was young patients, high energy trauma.
Yeah.
So I really loved it. But also importantly, you know, you then have you know a public system, which is what I loved about it, that you know what, here you are, guys, working in the NHS, because we have got this great debate at the moment now, because people, so the government wants to establish some kind of NHS, but it's called NHI, so National Health Insurance. But of course, they've got such a terrible record of running things like the, electricity
Water.
and South African Airways, and no, water is a natural resource. You cannot
Okay.
mismanage water. So, so you can't make water. You either have a drought or you don't. So so the concern there is that, if the government runs NHI, then they're going to run it to the ground, like they have with all other parastatal companies. So it was nice to be part of an NHS system that works. Like, what, actually, it could be like this, if we do it properly. And we spoke about Silverstein and motor racing a bit earlier, and it's funny because when Max Verstappen was airlifted to hospital, I thought it's how great it is that I'm pretty sure that he's been airlifted to an NHS hospital. There's
Yeah.
no way he's been airlifted. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, in our country, that would never happen. If a sportsman gets injured, they go to the private sector. So it's such a nice advertisement for the NHS, that you've got like a high profile sports person who goes to a public institution and expects to get excellent care.
Only when they
So-
don't. Only when they don't have a choice.
Yeah. So that bit was very nice. And also, I mean, now, like just how you do things, I mean, firstly, as a team, your camaraderie is just like second to none, and just like how you guys just get together, the
The
you know, the
Christmas
after work,
party. That's what you're
the
talking about.
Christmas parties, you know, what's the pub now? Say the hospital.
Good Sam's. Good
Good
Samaritan.
Sam's. You see, like all those kind of things. So that, I mean, the team spirit, you know, was just amazing to be a part of, and so I mean, that was really nice to see.
Yeah.
And you know, having come back home, I've tried to sort of incorporate some of those things into how we do things, and you know, what we do, because I mean, the social component is just as important as what you do during office hours.
Absolutely. I found photos of you at the Christmas party in fancy dress. But don't worry, I'm not going to share
that was
those.
Pete. That was Pete.
I think there's a video of you doing karaoke on stage, but don't worry, that's going to remain private between us, Professor.
You know, making that obvious comparison between back home and UK, and indeed what you saw in New York and in Jerusalem. How does Cape Town differ from elsewhere in the world?
So look, I think, I mean, we actually have a wonderful place to work, in the sense that, you know, we've got a very wide spectrum of injuries, and also because, you know, we've got like a very big first world component, but we're still a majority third world country, you know. So it's that coming together of the two worlds, you know, and that's what we practice. That, you know, you're gonna get a person who lives in like the most remote village, comes in with a neck of femur fracture, and they're gonna be side by side with a person from inner Cape Town, you know, who has been shot, or a tourist from Germany who forgot to bring his travel insurance, ends up in our hospital. So it's that melting pot of like just the different, you know, cultures that you see, and the spectrum of injuries, and also just the sheer volume though. So you know, the biggest thing is the numbers. And you know, I mean, look, when I went to Jerusalem, it's funny because I went on a fellowship, and I obviously was a little bit concerned about going to Jerusalem. You know, I didn't know what to expect. I expected like a massive culture shock, and I was looking forward to the New York part of it, you know, with okay, you know, that's going to be fantastic. But I had such a lovely time in Israel. You know, it really, really was unbelievable. And again, same thing, you know, I walked into the morning meeting and I saw the cases they were discussing, and I was like, oh, again, you know, not only could I work here, but I could run this place, you know, because, you know, no, seriously, because, you know, like, you know, because the beauty that you guys don't realize is that, you know, yes, you've got the cases, but you also have got theater to process. Of course, you've got some issues with theater, but you've got reliable theater time to process the cases. So your stress comes from like, okay, fine, what do I do with this one, or which surgeon is available and stuff, you know. But my, and then of course you've got is it Liz
Yeah,
who
Liz
helps with
Dunn.
yeah,
Liz Dunn,
Liz
yeah.
Dunn, yeah. Liz was just brilliant. I thought if I could get someone like Liz in my hospital, I would be the happiest person.
I'm definitely
No, I
cutting
think
this bit out. She's not
yeah.
listening. She's not hearing that.
So the thing is, it takes the stress off you, because I mean, I always say to the guys how I would love to come to work and someone says to me, okay, fine, you've got 5 femur fractures and you must go to theater 5 and do them there.
Yeah.
You know, there's an anesthetist, there's a theater nurse, there's everyone
All
there
the
for you.
kits
You
there,
just
yeah.
go.
Crack on.
Exactly. Whereas in my normal day starts at 7 o'clock, and I will go through the cases. So now when I leave the meeting, then I must go to theater and fight for space. You know, yes, of course, we've got cases that are, theaters that are allocated to us, but there's also the emergency board, which is shared with everyone else, you know, so the neurosurgeons, the gynecologist, and you know, the pecking order there. That, I mean,
Yeah.
try and say, you
We're
know,
always at the bottom, aren't we?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
exactly, yeah.
Orthopedics.
So you
We-
end
we-
up doing the
It's a familiar story. It's not. We still have it at times as well with the emergency board for sure.
I'm sure
Yeah.
everyone in the world is sitting there nodding.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
An
So now, of
appendix
course,
will go first, right, before your neck of femur. Every
the
time.
bear hole, like, you know how,
Yeah.
so, you know, we've got like a triage system where red means, you know, do it now,
Yeah.
and orange is 2 hours, and yellow is 6 hours. So we joke that the neurosurgeons do their word round on a Monday, and then they decide which cases will be booked as red on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So,
Yeah.
of course, now at 3 in the morning, then they send for the femur nail or the
Yeah.
tibia X fix, and
So you guys do operate all night, don't you?
we work through the night. And also because of the sheer volume, it's just not possible for every case to be supervised by a consultant. It just
Yeah.
would never work.
And
So
so so where is that sweet spot? Because a lot of people go on fellowship to South Africa knowing that
yeah,
they're going to get amazing exposure to independent operating, and they walk out, and actually your junior surgeons become competent at straightforward nailings and platings really quite early in their training, don't they? Where is that
yeah.
sweet spot between having good supervision so that you learn good techniques early and then you can become independent at those, and just
Yeah.
getting independent operating?
Yeah, so it just depends on the seniority of the trainee. So for your first year, we'll put you mostly on our lists, which are supervised. So I'll take
Yeah.
you through how to do an ankle fracture, like from start to finish. We'll then go into humerus fracture. So all of that and that gets done mostly at the secondary level hospitals. So because we have quite a wide spectrum of trainees. The guys who've graduated in a South African institution will have seen some kind of orthopedic surgery, so it's nothing completely new for them. But we have lots of trainees who come from the rest of the continent, like some of the people from Sudan. We've got guys from, Malawi. And so some of those guys will never have seen an orthopedic operation in their life, you know.
Wow.
So when they come in as a trainee on day one, there's a lot of work to be done there, So those are the ones that we will then sort of just first couple of months, you're really quite protected. You will, only do cases complete supervision but by about 6 months, they start now doing, ankle fractures on their own, radius ulnar, and but you don't become a registrar until you've done at least a year of that pre-registrar program.
Right.
So as a result, by the time you come to our rotation as a registrar, you're fairly, proficient at basic trauma. You are self-sufficient at night because, let's say you
Wow.
need to work through the night because we don't do femur nails, we don't do tibia nails, we don't do X6s on our orthopedic lists. So those get booked on the emergency board, and the registrar who is on call does those things on their own. So it's, there is, obviously lots of training that goes into it, but at some point you've got to let go and go express yourself. So
And I guess you review the metalwork. You have metalwork meetings and X-ray meetings where
yeah,
you
yeah.
look at it all.
So look, yes, of course the cases get done unsupervised, but with that, it's not unsupported. So I'm
Yeah.
still available. Like you will still, like, if there's a problem, of course I will, leave my clinic and walk to theater. If I'm on call, I'll come out at night, and then of course we then give feedback in the morning, look and see what's been done. So it's not completely just like, see one, do one, teach one. There is some there is lots of support available. And also, because the other thing we used to struggle with was just getting, enough assistance for the case. But over the last couple of years, we've had an explosion of medical students from the global north, basically, looking for experience, some registrars in training, and lots of fellowship applications as well. So we have enough bodies now to move around, such that every case has got at least two pairs of hands, and it's very beneficial for the people from overseas because, if our guys do, look, 60% of our trauma is done at night, unsupervised by registrars.
Wow.
So for a guy to do 10 less femur nails in the month makes no difference to his training. But if someone comes from the Netherlands and they do 10 femur nails, it makes a massive difference in their training.
That
It
could
really
be
does.
it could be a year's worth for some places.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's one of those few areas in life where, both parties benefit.
Yeah.
And we support it because, I always say that we consume a lot of, knowledge and scientific knowledge from the UK, from the US, from Canada, so we rely on those countries to produce the sort of orthopedic literature. So our contribution is never going to be much in terms of the literature, because we don't always have structures in place for research, but our contribution comes from the technical aspect of orthopedics, like
Training
the clinical
surgeons.
operation. So you come here, bang in your nails, and then go back home now and operate and help and publish, and
show people how to do it.
So Tom, how do people get in touch with you to arrange visits and fellowships?
So the easiest one is to email me. So it's my first name at msn.com, Microsoft Network.com, MSN. So that's the best way to get hold of me. And I mean, we welcome visitors, all the time, and there's no risk of the place being overcrowded. It's still quite well controlled, and but we make sure that we have just enough people for everyone to have a valuable time, in Cape Town. And also, of course, we sell the city as well, because I mean, like, why come and work only when there's so much that you can do out there? And so we encourage the guys to
because Cape Town is a glorious city, isn't it?
You must get cash to come down,
No, I'd love to come.
Yeah. You must make a plan.
Yeah.
In fact, there's one of the, there's a combined orthopedic knee societies. They're known as COCS, COKS. So I think one of the next COCS meetings is in South Africa. It's unfortunate, I know. Combined orthopedic knee societies. It's known as COCS.
Because wasn't there ISACOS a few years back in Cape Town? I think
it was.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So I'm going to come. I'm going to come and join all the COCS in South Africa at some point. I think I'll fit right in.
Yeah, no, you must come.
When are you coming to London next? Because I want to see you whoop Pete's ass at tennis.
Oh,
I'm going to hire a court.
So I haven't played in a while, but I'd love to play again. Actually, so I mean, you said earlier on that I'm the ABC fellow for next year.
Yeah.
Actually, it was meant to happen last year,
right?
But then, of course, the pandemic struck, and it was postponed to this year, and again postponed to next year. So I'm hoping it happens, and one of our stops is London, so that's when I'm hoping to come.
Pete, what's coming next from Orthohub?
We're doing some surgical approaches.
Oh,
surgical
fantastic.
approach videos. So this is all part of the instructional material come from Orthohub. So I'm doing the posterior approach to the knee, which I'm quite excited.
You're going to the knee. Stay away from the knee, man. Stick to your...
Actually, you taught me that,
because
we used to do the traditional posterior approach, and then Pete showed me that Lobenhoffner, and now it's been a game changer for us.
Yeah, but I've got a development on the Lobenhoffner as well. I've got a new a new adaptation on that, which you're going to love.
The Bates modification.
Okay, wow.
So we'll send you the videos. Fantastic.
No Bates Hoffner.
Yeah. On that note, thank you very much, Sithombo. It's been a pleasure having you and seeing you again, my friend.
Sithombo, thank you so much. It's been lovely having you.
We enjoyed our chat.
No, thank you so much. It's been great, great catching up. And thanks for the invitation. And hopefully next time I see you, we'll be in person.
In person, in the Good Samaritan.
Yes, Good Sam, here we come.
Here we come.
In Cape Town for you, Cash.
Yeah, I'll be there with the COCS. Okay, Pete, I'll see you next Thursday.
Yeah, see you next Thursday.
Brilliant.
Cheers to Sithombo. Thank you so much.
Okay, cheers, guys.